The death of George Floyd was shocking. Those images, those violent images have been transmitted around the world, and the reverberation of that tragic event is still being felt globally and, of course, in the city of Minneapolis. We understand and we have empathy for the great heartache and anger that thousands of people are feeling in the city of Minneapolis. And we hope for their sake that the response overall is one of justice and compassion, that the root causes of these problems, let alone the grief for the Floyd family, are addressed immediately and sensitively. But of course, as an Australian, this event makes me think about our own history. And where does Australia fit in terms of its history of race and the work of reconciliation? So I want to reflect for a few moments then upon the recent history of Australia and some significant events that have taken place. In particular, there was an event that affected me and many others that took place in 1993. It was at a football game in Melbourne. And many thousands of people were gathered for that game. And in the game, a number of Aboriginal players were playing. It was a terrific game, and two of the stars of the game were Aboriginal footballers, Nicky Winmar and Gilbert McAdam. At the end of the game, and Nicky's team won, at the end of the game, as Nicky's moving towards the boundary line, as he gets close to the crowd, he's met with a torrent of racial abuse from hundreds of those spectators. And Winmar pauses in front of this barrage of abuse and carefully lifts up his football guernsey and touches his black skin and cries out, "I'm black and I'm proud of it." It was an extraordinary moment. It wasn't just about a football game. It was about a man, a human being, who felt deep hurt and anger at what he was experiencing and responded with a plea from the depths of his heart, with an affirmation about who he was in the world, in that context. It wasn't just a sporting game. It captured, in a sense, the best of Australia, the spirit of Australia. In recent decades, black and white have been working together on works of reconciliation. And there's something about that moment with Nicky Winmar that it was a galvanising moment, a moment which encapsulated the spirit and the heart of the kind of Australia that we aspire to be because of the leadership of this man. With that image in mind, I want us to explore for a moment race and reconciliation within the context of the life of the church. What's the church's response to these issues? And to set up a theological backdrop, I want to take two critical symbols from the life of the church: the crucifixion and the event at Pentecost. Let's begin with the crucifixion. The crucifixion is intrinsically a political event. Jesus came in the first century teaching and practicing this community of equals. There were no master-slave relationships here. It was a community of friends. His teaching and proclamation was about a new space. There's the reign of God in which boundaries, religious, social, racial boundaries are transcended in the name of love. Subsequently, because he pushed the edge, because he pushed the boundaries, he was crucified by the Romans. Yes, the Romans would have seen Jesus in some way a threat to their social order, to the peace of Rome. He was crucified using a Roman form of execution, which was reserved for traitors or subversives. The crucifixion was a political event. Now, we sometimes forget that because decades and centuries after the crucifixion, Each generation of practicing Christians tried to come to terms with the crucifixion. They developed theological theories about the crucifixion. Why did Jesus die? What was the significance of his death? We often describe these theories or these theologies as atonement theories. These atonement theories, of course, reflect the customs, the values and the practices of particular eras. The cumulative effect, though, of these atonement theories in the life of the church is that they run the risk of sentimentalizing or sanitizing the cross. They take away from the nucleus of the Christian faith, which was this extraordinary political event that was carried out in and through the life and death of Jesus in the name of love. Significantly then, Pentecost, the event of Pentecost, takes up the tradition of Jesus, this boundary breaking, this boundary transcending tradition, as its mantle, as its key platform for the future. Now, this is in chapter 2 of the book of Acts. It's a beautifully crafted story, and it's constructed in such a way that the detail is really important. The writer is at pains to show that this is a multicultural event. There are people of all persuasions, all types from all over the Mediterranean. Most likely, there were brown, black, and even perhaps some white faces there. It's a multicultural gathering. At this gathering, in the early days of the church, the Spirit makes its presence felt. This is the Spirit of illumination, the Spirit of truth, the Spirit of love. In making its presence felt, it brings about a remarkable organic unity amongst that disparate group of people. From being a motley crew, they are unified through the power of the Spirit. They are one. The important footnote here, though, is that the unity does not sacrifice the diversity. The differences are honoured in the making of the unity of this church. It's a remarkable image of the church. And this unity was then carried out in the life and practice of that church. You'll note at the end of chapter 2 and 4 in the book of Acts, this now unified church is not only a church of compassion that shares things amongst its people, but it's a church also of justice. The politics of Jesus, which we saw implemented in his teaching and his practice, the politics of Jesus which led to his crucifixion, is captured in the life and heart of this early church as depicted in the early chapters of Acts. It is a remarkable image and a very, very relevant template for the modern church. So let's come back now to the 21st century and the life and practices of the church, especially in relationship to questions of race and the work of reconciliation. I want to point out three things that I think the church needs to continue to reflect upon. And they relate to emotions, the value of emotions, the importance of feeling things, the importance of critique, and the importance of practices of solidarity. With emotions, there's nothing wrong with emotions. There's nothing wrong with anger. Many of us were brought up in families and sometimes in churches where we were wary about emotions and especially wary about anger. There's nothing wrong with anger in itself. We need, in a sense, to learn to be empathic to the expression of emotion. Empathic to when, if someone expresses anger to us, can we get behind it and see what is at stake? Emotions, in many ways, reflect the values that we hold dearly. We respond emotionally because somehow or some way, something that we value has been tarnished or damaged. This leads to a response of anger. So part of the work of reconciliation is to learn to listen deeply, to learn to respect emotions and to see if we can understand and discern those cherished values. The second aspect has to do with the work of critique. In recent decades in the life of the Australian Church, there have been some terrific collaborative programs thanks to the leadership of our own Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders. We're learning more and more to work collaboratively, and we've had great leadership from our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander sisters and brothers. Part of that work too has been, we've started to go back historically and to reflect not only upon the history of Australia, but also the history of the church in Australia. We need to develop finely tuned, finely focused critique of our own history. We need to look at things that work against reconciliation. We need to look at how prejudices are promulgated. We need to look how groups work, because there's something about prejudice that is often manifested through the life of large groups. There's a kind of large group psychology that we need to understand. So not only do we continue to work in a collaborative manner, but we need to use the best of social and intellectual research to understand resistance to change and resistance to reconciliation. The third and final thing is that we need to continue with the wonderful acts of reconciliation. In Australia, and I'm stepping back now from the church, we have a remarkable generation of new voices coming through our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities. We're seeing more and more of them on television and social media. And in recent decades, we've seen some great leadership and some what I'm calling is some acts of solidarity. On the 28th of May, 20 years ago, and we were acknowledging the anniversary of that, there was a remarkable event in the city of Sydney. It was a gesture of reconciliation. And over a period of about 2 or 3 hours, some 300,000 Australians marched across the iconic Sydney Harbour Bridge. They marched together, black and brown, white and yellow. Australians of all persuasions marched together as a symbol and gesture of solidarity. It was really quite moving. And for me and for many others, that bridge walk set a new tone to the work of reconciliation in the life and practice of not only Australia as a country, but also within Australian churches. It held up that this is the benchmark, this is the bar, this is what we need to aspire to. So it's these aren't easy times, and I'm not pretending that there are simple solutions, but there are important signs within our society and within the life of churches which give us hope. And there are also important memories. It remains to be seen how what is taking place in Minneapolis will play out. I would encourage all people of religious persuasions, all people of Christian practice and belief, to pray for the city of Minneapolis, that there will be not only compassion for those who are grieving, but justice. That justice will be seen to be done and will be done. But also within our own country of Australia, to remember something of our own history, to remember the courage and the wisdom of our own Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander leaders, and to remember the stories. Remember the image of Nicky Winmar, that remarkable story. Yes, it was a football game, but it was more than a football game. A number of us had the pleasure of seeing Nicky Winmar since that event being interviewed and talking about the event. He's actually a very shy and modest person. And knowing that and seeing what he did that day, I'm black and I'm proud of it, only underlines the courage with which he spoke, the kind of Australia that we want to live in, and also it gives us a clue about the kind of church that we want to be. In the name of God, Creator, Redeemer and Sustainer. Amen.